Bill Graham, welcome to the World XP Podcast, episode number 5. It's been an interesting couple months, that's for sure.
Sure.
I remember you texted me the other day. I think you sent me a link to this Revolt Summit that was last fall. And even though it was last fall, they had a lot of good points pertaining to the issues that we see today. One of them being, I think Candace Owens and T.I. were in an argument about which party was better to support for the black community. And Killer Mike was kind of like, why are you guys arguing about which one? They both suck.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we try to do our own thing? I thought that was really interesting, especially now, because I feel like that kind of sentiment is gaining more traction now with the recent events. I don't know what you think. I mean, you sent it to me. So what?
Yeah. So when I watched that video, it was kind of eye opening for me because during that, when I was watching it, or like right before I started watching it, I'm starting to have a change of mindset of, especially in my morals and beliefs when it comes to what I support and what policies and what politicians and other constituents are in place that I put my vote towards. But I think it's real important for people of color to kind of sit back and kind of see what these constituents and what politicians have in place for us. Like, what can you give us? Like, instead of just like pandering, saying like, oh, this black person got shot, let me put on some African clothing just to make you feel better, to show that I care. But like, you're not going to care like later on down the road because like you just put money in your pocket. You know what I mean? So it's just like you have to like see like this stuff that's happening and actually see change instead of all these people. And it's like, I mean, it's good that people in all these companies are like showing that they're there for the black community and stuff, and that's really appreciative. But at the same time, it's like, what are you going to do though, like for change? So a big thing for me when I watched that video and I kind of sat by myself, kind of thought about it. I was like, man, he made some really good points. Like he's saying like the Democrats and the Republicans are like kind of like this two-headed snake. Like you're choosing the lesser two evils essentially. So it's like, whenever you pick, like you're like, there's always something's going to be happening. Like it's going to be a detriment to like the black community or people of color. Right. So it's just like, you have to really like see it from like an individual like perspective of like which person is good and like what are they doing for the communities and like inner cities that are like kind of crumbling like across like the U.S. And like a big thing that Candace brought up, she was saying like a lot of these inner cities across the U.S. have been like democratically run for like the past 50 years, and there's like no progress. Like there's no capital for like people like black business owners. The education systems are bad. Crime's really bad. I know about my family, especially my mom and dad, they grew up in Canada. It's like the number one crime-rated city in the U.S. And like they revamped the whole police thing. Like they're more like military-style weapons and stuff like that. It's like that's really not going to like solve any of the issues. It's like you kind of have to look at the constituents and like the politicians that have been in place that say like, oh yeah, we're going to do this and that. We're going to change it, make everything better, and that hasn't changed. So it's just like, people are like blaming like the cops for like what's going on, but it's like, yeah, like I mean, what happened to George Floyd? That was obviously like everyone's in solidarity behind that.
Yeah,
that cop and those other cops should be prosecuted and they should be put in jail for a long time. That's just simple as that. Like they just like 100%. Like you shouldn't like no cop should put their knee in the back of somebody.
No,
it's like there's no like you're supposed to render aid to somebody. You're not supposed to like suffocate them because like like I don't know what it is when it comes to cops, when they're like the mentality when it comes to situations like that, like they're either pissed or they're mad or they're just like kind of fed up with like their day and they have to take it out on somebody else. But like there's no excuse for it. But
it's almost like a power thing too. It's like once you're in that position of so long, like of being in a power for so long, kind of corrupts your mind a little bit, and you start to be able to be like, oh well, I can do this and get away with it because I have this badge protecting me, and the whole culture of like we're not gonna report you, and even if we have to fire you, we'll just get you hired somewhere else. Like
it's like it's part of that system that's in place right now, and like. And I'm starting to realize that at first when I did it, because like I kind of come from a conservative like libertarian view, and I have like a mixture of both.
Right.
Because like recently I started kind of like diving into libertarian because it's like conservative is like it's not really too extreme, but like you can kind of see what your other like fellow conservatives like they have like these certain views. It's like well he should have been obeying the law. I was like dude, like it doesn't work like I was like you start to get tired of it because you want to kind of see like the truth and like the actual like objective like reality of the situations that are happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like that's not always the case. You know what I mean? It's like just because you have it bad doesn't mean you can abuse it. Like you're just as much a citizen as a person and the people that you're trying to protect.
Right.
So it's just like you have a duty to those people, and these people have a duty to like to kind of help like mend the community and make it a better place for people to live in. So it's just like it's kind of like it's it's a balance. But
that's why they call it public service.
Yeah,
almost.
Right.
And like I think 2 points to that. I think you and I have had similar mindset shifts over the last two or so years. Both myself coming from a little bit more conservative, and then once going more libertarian, especially when like you said, people be like, oh well, he should have just obeyed the law. It's like he passed a counterfeit 20. Like that's so not called.
So there's like different situations. It's like all right, you have to like here's what it is. Like you got to see it from like a rational and like objective perspective. Like you can't like all your subjective like senses and all your other opinions that you have like of what you think is right and what's actually right, you have to like toss it out the window because like you're starting to see that now. Like they're starting to in like in a society where like a lot of the truth and like a lot of stuff that's been wrong, like they're turning it into like they want it to become right, and the stuff that was right it's starting to become wrong.
Right.
So it's like you're starting to see that kind of shift in like the society and like it's kind of like this postmodernistic like view of like things.
You see that almost with the definition of the word racism. When people say you can't be racist against white people, it's like you're changing the definition of that word to fit
your narrative,
to fit whatever
exactly.
you're trying to push, and like to the point where it's like, have white people probably had it better? Yeah, obviously. But that like the definition of the word racism is discriminating by virtue of race. But
it applies to that person though. So like a good example. I got a couple of examples. I had a good friend of mine. She's kind of like close family. She's almost like my sister. Her name's Alex Tobert. She has a brother named Brandon Tobert. And I think Brandon told me it was either her or she or Brandon or someone else that their protests on 610 by the courthouse in Stafford. Mm-hmm. They had protests. They were all lined up, and I had my Jeep, and I was driving by with my girlfriend. We were going out to get Carl's ice cream, whatever. And I saw the protest. I mean, I have nothing against protesting at all. Like I love like when people protest and they express their like opinions and their freedom of speech and their ideas and stuff like that. That's fine. I'm for that and I support it. But when it comes to certain narratives, like of course I'm going to have like my opinion, like certain opinions and disagreements. But that's when you find common ground. You got to sit down and talk about it. So when I was driving, like I guess someone had called me a racist, and I was just like.
When you were driving?
I was driving by, and someone was like, "Hey, was that Will Graham driving the Jeep?" And they're like, "Yeah." Like, yo, he's a racist. Because I had a disagreement with somebody like on Facebook. So it was somebody that I had an argument with or like a debate. Like we were like I was trying to find like their perspective, and they just like so like now like the term racism is like if you disagree with somebody if they don't like it, they just label you a racist because like that's just like oh no, like you're not for me, you're not with me, then you're a racist. So I was like that's not how it works. So I was like when people do that. That's what kind of upsets me is like because there's real races out there and that kind of cheapens racism. So it's just like there's actual races out there and you're just gonna assume that I'm a racist when I'm really not. That kind of like upsets me because like there's really people out there that are victims of racism and like discrimination. Then another thing, it's like it's a universal term. So like you can be black and be racist towards white people. It doesn't matter like what happened in the past and like. Yeah. And that's the thing we were texting about. I was like, your skin color and what happened in the past, it doesn't define like who you are as your own person. It's like you can be white and not be racist just because your ancestors or you know, there's people that you knew or like your parents knew or like your relatives, whatever. They could have been racist, but they're not you though. You know what I mean? It's like you have your own beliefs and ideas. You're your own like free person. You can make those choices on your own.
That's where it comes into like that libertarian mindset of like each individual has their own path and their own views and like to lump everybody together. And I do want to preface that what I was saying, like the whole racism thing is like you and I both understand that like throughout Jim Crow and like history, like those sort of they have been intertwined into how the U.S. does things generally speaking.
Right.
The people in power have not had an interest to change those things because it doesn't suit them, and so the echoes of them still exist, and that's what we're seeing today.
Right.
But with that said, like you were saying, it's like each individual is their own person, and if you were to lump everybody together, it's like you lose the idea of the individual.
That's like the epitome of like racism. Like you're saying, like like I'm black, I can't be racist because of the past. Like my ancestors was like, no, dude, like it doesn't work like that. It's like you can be a certain person and be discriminate towards another person because of what happened in the past. That's racism.
Yeah.
That's like you're literally lumping a group of people or categorizing a group of people, and you're discriminating them based off the past. Like that's racism itself. So it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. And it's like, well, like you gotta like see it from like an objective sense. Like that's like literally what racism is. Like you can't discriminate people based on what happened in the past. And that's and that's another thing. There's another thing that plays into the racism, because like you have your individual races that play into the system, and like they hold like some type of constituent or a place of power.
Right.
Like say a good example would be like Bill Clinton.
Right.
Like he signed that bill that incarcerated a lot of like people of color.
Yeah. Was it the 94?
Yeah, and what's the guy's name he was a KKK leader back then. His name's like Robert. I think it was like Robert Kraft, I think, or something like that.
Robert Kraft is the Patriots owner.
Yeah, dude. Or I don't know if it was Robert Kraft or it was someone named Robert. I forgot who it was, but there's a picture of like Joe Biden. He was like, I guess they were like on a parade car or something. There's like a picture of him waving, and the KKK leader right below him. So it's like you're saying you're for black people and like people of color, but like during your career, like in politics, you put more black people in prison, other people of color in prison over the course of like 5 decades. So like how long have you've like been in politics? So it's like people need to understand, like, doesn't even like set aside all these politics, like identity politics, just crumple up, throw out the window, and just see it for what it really is. So it's like the Democrat Party. You see all these people that say, "Oh, we're for you," we're the party for color, gays, activism, all that type of stuff. I was like, okay, so what are you going to do for us? Oh, we're going to sign a new bill that let you get married to whoever you want to. We're going to do a bill where illegal immigrants can get school without having to pay. They get government assistance. We'll do a law to it panders to black people. We'll paint a street Black Lives Matter to show that we care. It's like, okay, yeah, that's cool. So what are you going to do about the police brutality, and what are you going to do about all these officers that have committed these heinous crimes against people, like innocent people that didn't do anything? It's just like, what are you going to do? Because exactly this, but the Republicans do the same thing. So it's just like you got all these people in position of power. It's like, oh no, let's give more power to the Democrats. Let's see what they're gonna give us all. Like they're gonna make all these promises. They're gonna fix all these issues for us. Like, no, let's give our vote to the Republicans. They're gonna do everything right. So it's just like.
It's the same thing every 4 years. They all promise.
Yeah, they all make these promises. So it's just like
they'll promise whatever they want to get elected.
Exactly. They just want the power. They want control, and that's what I want. Like a lot of my friends to understand. It's just like you don't have to look like what Killer Mike said in that Revolt song. It's perfect. He's like you're fighting over who's the best master. Yeah. Essentially, it's like you're already free. Mm-hmm. Just sit down and see what you have, and what can they provide for you? What change is going to happen? You got to sit down, do your research. You can't just go based off of identity politics, and that's a big thing for me. So it's just because that's what my parents taught me. It's you got to sit down and see what's right for you. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay. So I sat down and researched, and I saw Donald Trump. He's like, well, I'm gonna. He had a whole list of stuff that he was gonna try to do, and I was like, okay, that's actually kind of really promising. Then Hillary Clinton had stuff that she was going to kind of feed off of what Obama already did, but kind of tweak it stuff and make it a little better. But at the same time, it was their whole situation with Benghazi where she got people killed and she she got caught pretty much. Yeah. And it's just I don't want someone like that in office. So it was kind of choosing the lesser of two evils. I'll just pick Trump because he's I never had someone who's not a politician be in office. Let's see what can happen. So it's I was kind of I was optimistic to see what happened, but he's done a lot of good things, but he's done a lot of bad things in terms of, the public opinion and divisiveness and not being empathetic towards, what's been going on. But I just wish a lot of my friends that happen to be black or color, they kind of have just get an eye opener and kind of see things from an objective sense and kind of not see it as identity politics and pick who's the best master, Democrat or Republican. Just kind of see here's our list of what Killer Mike said, here's our demands, what can you give us? Right.
And then what I mean? Pick which one based on who can
and for us. And not just like a career. And like another thing is like the career politicians. That's got to stop too. Like you can't have like Nancy Pelosi and like Adam Schiff and like all the other like Adam Schumer and like or Chuck Schumer. I'm sorry. Like they have all like their districts.
Mitch McConnell.
Like they're like you take a look at their like they're they virtual signal to all these different types of marginalized people, and like all you gotta do is look at their districts. Like look at San Francisco. I remember like when I was like a little younger, my parents like they would go up there when my dad was active duty, and like they would show me pictures of like all the different places they visit when and it was like super nice. Like it was all organized. Like the infrastructure, the city infrastructure was good. Like there's no like there's always gonna be homeless people, but it wasn't as bad as it is now. Like there's homeless people like defecating in the streets. Like and there's like needles everywhere, and it's just like the state and local government, they give homeless people like needles. So it's just like you want to have someone like that like in like politics like over a span of decades, and they tell you and they pander like, oh, it's going to get better, we'll fix it. It's like you had this amount of time to fix it, you couldn't do it. So like what I mean? It's like people need to understand like like don't let those people control you and like put you in a state of like a fear and nothing get done, because that's how because the Democrat Party like they won't survive without the black vote. That's why there's always like that. There's always something about black like something like black on black crime or like injustice, police brutality. Like they use that, and they use the media to control the narrative to keep people under. So it's like if you vote for us, we'll fix it. Like we'll put Black Lives Matters on the street. We'll do this and that, but there's no police reform. So the only thing they did, like we talked about the Minneapolis thing. Did you hear about that? So the city council members, they all agreed to dismantle the police. So like it's already in the first early stages of like defunding and like replacing it with like another public service. So it's like, okay, like if that's a disaster, like that should be kind of like an example of like what not to do. You know what I mean?
Exactly. But even if it works, then it's like, okay, well then maybe we should do that. So it's like it's both ways. But I wanted to bring up. You made me think of two separate points. But the first one is like people's track records from like decades and decades ago. What's interesting about that is now people will go back on Twitter and find some old tweet from like 10 years ago and be like, oh, he's a racist. So it's like, and then like you and I will come out and be like, oh, they could have changed. And it's interesting because people can change for sure. Yeah. But in the political eye, it's less forgiving because of they did it to benefit off whatever they were saying at the time versus like Kevin Hart's situation when he was going to host the Oscars, and then somebody found a tweet from like 5 years ago, and then they were like, oh, he can't host the Oscars anymore. It's like that's different or it's different to me anyways, because Kevin Hart, like he comes out and he goes on Joe Rogan. He's talking about how he's going to the inner cities and he's educating people. Like the inner city kids
and he's also doing like his his thing. He's giving back to the communities. Right.
Is that different for you as well? As far as can people change or not change?
Because I think people can change, but like that's the thing. Like I see this a lot with people. Like they will go out, they say like certain things like they said in the past that it might have been racist or whatever. And there's some people that will go out on social media and they'll like take pictures or videos showing like what they're doing, but they still act the same. Right. You know what I mean? So it's just like they only do it for the clout, and they only do it for like the attention and to just to line their pockets. Yeah. But like a big thing for me is like the people that you don't hear of that are like doing stuff in inner cities. Like there's one player that the Eagles, Malcolm Jenkins, he played at on the Saints. He wasn't posting anything on he wasn't posting anything on social media. I didn't even knew he was doing stuff for the inner cities. Like he was going to like the education system in like Philadelphia and like kind of setting stuff up to where provide like meals for students like they're that can't afford stuff at home. And he was helping get kids off the street and like they were playing sports and doing other stuff like that. So just a whole bunch of other players that are doing that you don't even hear about.
Yeah, setting up like
so it's just like the thing that makes me mad is just like or upsets me is like there's people that are doing that they still have that state of mind of like whatever radical state of mind they have, whether it be racist or some other like type of state of mind. They take that and they put it on social media and they do it for clout. They line their pockets for money, or they do this for followers and they get all the attention or whatever. But like
they don't change.
They don't change. So it's like they don't do anything. So like that's like the pandering I'm talking about. Like people they pander, but nothing gets done. So like The only thing, like pandering, it may appeal to certain people. Like, okay, that makes me feel better. It shows that they care about Black Lives Matter. I'm done. So it's like, and I'll just sit around and like, okay, are you serious? Like, that's it? Like, so what are we gonna do about police reform? Like, what are we gonna do to get more police training for like these certain situations about going to these inner cities and communities where violence is happening and it's running rampant? What are we gonna do to equip the police that's gonna make them more like accountable and more respectful and like kind of more like a little bit more well trained when it comes to situations like that? You don't always have to draw your gun on somebody like just because you think they're suspicious. You just draw your weapon and be like, oh, like I think he's suspicious because he's wearing a hoodie. It's like no, like dude, like you. I was like, you can't do that. Should be like you. Like, every officer should have like a track record to see what they did of like misdemeanors and like they kind of check out. It's like all right. They get and like you get pulled into like your department, like head of department, whatever, and they have a meeting with you. I was like, okay, like so you had these like incidents right here. What do you think you could have done differently? And if you like you address like what you did wrong, whatever that, then the next time if you do it again, like you don't get like a second chance. No, you know what I mean? Like you know, it's like because this is a job like you know what I mean? Like it's
the stakes are higher than a normal job.
Yeah, the stakes are a little bit higher because like you have a firearm on you and like you have a lethal weapon and there's other people like you're there to preserve and protect. You're not there to like you're not like crime fighters. No. You know what I mean? That's not your sole like profession, that job. Like you have to serve and protect and like render aid to people. That's just how it is. Like you're a public like. It's like almost like public service at the same time. Like you have to be part of the people because you are like part of the people. It's just like you just like have another standard. You know what I mean?
Well, it is public. It's not like public service. It is. Public service.
It's close to it.
It's the same way with politicians. Like if you are in government, you are there to serve the people that you are representing. You're not there to line your own pockets or do whatever. And that's the thing with term limits when you're talking about career politicians. It's like the problem is they're never going to vote for term limits because that hurts them.
Right. So I'm not going to get as much money as them now, so like I'm not voting for that. Like that's a stupid idea. Yeah. So like they're not going to vote for it.
No way that's going to happen unless either there's an executive order or some other drastic change. But it's a weird one. And the other thing I thought about earlier, we were talking about is like this whole idea of like white privilege is like it makes sense on paper. But like you and I are in the same room right now, and we are being treated as equally because we are treating each other as equally. If somebody else comes into the room and treats you differently because you're black, the problem is not me existing and being white. The problem is the person
that just has like a prejudice against me. He's being discriminated.
Yeah, the problem is racism. The problem is not a white person for existing as white. It's the problem. It's the problem of the person who's treating that
individual person. That person,
right?
As for them, that's who they are.
And it's weird because then. It's like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do, or what is somebody else supposed to do? It's like if you just exist, then that's a problem. It's like, like there's a flaw with that idea because like people say, okay, well, inherently life matters, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, that doesn't jive with that idea. There's like like on paper it makes sense because you look at it and you're like, yeah, I guess I did. Like I haven't got pulled over by the cops as much as like a black person would have, but like that's not my fault. That's the cops' fault for pulling over the black people too much.
So it's just people lumping each other into like these different groups, and that's what people need to understand. I was like, you just need to stop like doing this whole identity politics, like this whole like marginalizing and categorizing people, and just be free. You're your own person. Mm-hmm. Like you're gonna have adversity. You're gonna have like obstacles in life. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be socioeconomic. It can there can be racist people that come at you and kind of impede you from what you're doing, but like. Doesn't matter because you can still get to where you need to. Like, there's like a lot of examples. Like, for a good example would be my dad. So like he's one out of 4 colored pilots in the Marine Corps to command his own squadron and his own air group, and he did it twice. Mm-hmm. So it's like 1 out of 4. I was like, dude, like, just like you haven't like there's like no other excuse because like he told me like there's been plenty of racists inside like the Marine Corps and in the military or whatever, and he's had his fair share of like combating it and like overcoming it. But he said yeah, it's there, but like that's not going to stop me from what I want to do. Like, and I'm not going to bash I'm not going to paint the rest of all these other white people that are there like as racist. Like I'm going to see those individuals that came at me. They're responsible for what they did. I'm not going to, the rest of the whole like white community and like white people as racist. And
that's an interesting point you made about like being able to overcome stuff. Like so if you're born into a situation like in the inner city where your dad's already in jail, you don't have guidance in the home, like in the gang, like the gang becomes your like brothers or whatever.
Mhm.
Like you can make all the best decisions in the world, and sometimes if you're put into a situation that's that poor, based on like we're talking about like this like all the stuff being intertwined,
Mhm.
it's so like when they say like systemic racism, they're like that there's a point like to so like there's truth to your point as well,
Right.
but there's also truth to like sometimes you can make all the best decisions in the world and it doesn't matter because some cop was racist and he shot you and you could have made the best decisions
Right. Yeah.
ever.
Exactly.
So it's like it's a real tough one because right now like if someone in a suburban community makes bad decisions, they'll probably turn out fine. But if somebody in the inner city makes bad decisions, they are most definitely not going to turn out fine. And like that's kind of like the equality of opportunity. Like we want to get the opportunity on a level playing field, not the outcome, because people are different.
Right.
And they have different capabilities. Like I have different capabilities from you, and like we think differently about different things, and we have different passions. So like if you and I have the exact same opportunities, we're gonna turn out different.
Right.
But to make sure that people are able to have like at least similar opportunities, right? There's
Like
like
socioeconomic.
yeah, like
opportunity.
there's gonna be inequality in the world, just like and like there just is because
Right.
people are different. People are unequal, and their outcomes are going to be unequal, and then their kids' starting points will be unequal from the next one, and that's just like that. That's just like you and I.
Right.
We could have the exact same opportunity starting from scratch.
Mhm.
We will turn out differently.
Right. You
Like,
just make
for
different
sure.
decisions.
And so our kids will then be starting out in a different place,
Right.
regardless of what good or bad decisions were made. If you and I start off in the exact same place, our kids will start different places.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so it's like we want to make sure that the society is well balanced enough
Mhm.
that there's not one group that like starts way far ahead. Or
Right.
behind
It's like
or
it's
whatever.
not like too like the disparity is not too
Right.
too bad.
The inequality cannot get out of hand,
Right.
because then the people at the bottom will be
But
like,
that's what I was saying
"Screw
with
it." Like we'll
Exactly,
just
but that's
fuck
what I was
the whole
saying. That's where the constituencies that are
Right.
in place right now come into play. Because like there's one during the crack epidemic,
thing.
there was like they had like this huge meeting with like a whole bunch of state officials and like federal officials. It was like, what can we do to like solve this? Like let's crack down on more like the laws and like incriminate more people and like give more power to the police.
Right.
And that was like the late '80s, like early '90s that was
Right.
going on. So it's like. Okay, so that was put into place. Then what happened? More people got incriminated, like people of color for like little petty crimes.
Yeah.
Like they're incarcerated longer, and like so it's just like they're pointing fingers at like at the police. Oh, police are bad. They should be defunded. It's like no, it's like yeah, you got to hold the police accountable. The individuals that do like the stuff that are like George Floyd and like
Right.
and the other incidents that have been happening, and it's like you got to look at. Like you can't just look at the bottom. You got to look top up. So you're like, okay, who like let these like? How long has this been going on? Like you got to kind of see from that
Who
perspective.
let them
Like
stay
I was
employed?
like who's been like who was appointed to let this happen and like or let this type of stuff happen. It's like you got to look at from like okay, so like who got to like so you got to be like who's
policy-
appointed. So like okay, this chief he needs to be investigated. And the state, whoever the council members and the governor, whatever, they need to be just as responsible because like they're letting it happen. It's like this has been going on too long, and that's what people need to stop saying. Like, oh, also police will never happen. I was like, no, like you're gonna have crime no matter what, no matter where you are, no matter like what your skin color is. There's always gonna be crime. It doesn't matter what it is. But like, another important thing for people to understand is like they have to see the facts. Like you have to see like the stats and like the facts behind every situation. Because there's one like the whole Michael Brown, the Ferguson. They were saying like, oh, like he got shot in the back. I was like, no, it's like there was like an eyewitness account when he said like, oh, he shot him in the back. The cop like straight up shot him in the back. They're like, oh, like did he really? And they found the autopsy report. He got shot like going this like the bullets came through his front body, came out his back. Yeah. And there's other eyewitness accounts that the media was covering saying that he attacked the officer and tried to reach for his firearm, firearm. So it's like okay. If you do something like that, if you try to take a hot firearm like that, he already has like the simple rules of engagement. Like he's going to shoot you, because it's either his life or yours, and he's not going to allow it. You know what I mean? Right. But there's other officers. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying like he could have handled that situation differently and just like took his firearm and like may have like dislodged it somewhere and just like took him to the ground and like subdue him and like put him in handcuffs, and he would have lived. You know what I'm saying? So it's like. There's different situations that like could happen differently because there's different people. Like these people are like these people that are cops. They're individuals, right? So like they're not going to handle every situation the same. They're not going to take it the same because they're different people. So it's like you can't take this whole profession and like this and just lump it in one thing and say all cops are bad. Like they just allow all this stuff to happen. It's like these people don't have control. It's like the people that are in control are like the constituencies and like all these people that are appointed in power. So it's like you have to point fingers at them and say, what are you going to do for this to change? You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like that has to change.
What policies are in place that let this happen?
Right.
And then who let these people stay employed after the first complaint?
Right.
And it's like that's another big part. Like it's like those flashes of like defund and abolish they're so short sighted and they don't go in depth to the whole problem. And the other problem with defund the police, and I was talking to Jason about this, like you take the money away from the cops. Like if you look at your individual as a skill set on the job market, what you would make, and you lower the salary that police can pay, you're going to get lower qualified people for those jobs.
Right.
And
exactly.
That's what you don't want, because then you will price out the people who are more qualified and who would like be good cops,
right?
Like be good at their jobs. Like you're going to price them out.
Be upset too because like the cost of living is going to go down for them. They can't afford I can't afford that. So
and they have no reason to be cops because they have the capabilities to go do something else. And so then it's like, okay, well, we're going to get stuck with a bunch of crappy cops, and if nobody understands that the policies are the problem, or like the people at the top who are creating policies and letting these people stay employed are the problem, that's not going to change. So you're going to get no change at the top with worse people at the bottom, and then that will
create more problems.
That's just going to be worse. So it's like it's definitely a. And that was the other thing. I was at a protest a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to one of the people there, and I was like, "Hey, do you guys have like concrete demands, like things that you want from them?" And they were like, "No." I was like,
"Okay, no straight answers."
So I was like, "Okay, so at what point do you call this a success, right? What sort of reform? Defund the police. Okay, well, what does that mean? I don't know." So that's the other problem with the protest is like I don't see anyone who's got this organizing, like these are the specific things we want and we need them by such and such time because of such and such other reason. Like there's no so when the government goes in and tries to make police reform policy, what are they going off of? They're just going off of like whatever they think will either one, get them more votes, two, what people tell them, which may or may not be true, or three, they're just making it up.
Right.
And so if they just try and do that and they don't get it all the way right, and it does get passed and then things don't change, either two things will happen. Either one, we'll have another George Floyd and then the protest will be 10 times worse the next time around.
Right.
Or two, the protest won't stop because they're like, well, this is not what we wanted anyways, so we're just going to keep protesting.
Right.
And neither of those seem to me like viable outcomes.
Solutions, right.
Solutions. And when people are yelling at each other, they're not trying to find the solution. They're just yelling.
Yeah, I think, and another thing, I would say like two things here that kind of tie into that. I would say from both sides, from the like law enforcement and just us as just regular people, and people who commit crimes and stuff like that. It's like I think honestly, it starts in the home. It's like there's a lot of like because they say there's a lot of like black crime that's like the most of like. And there's a lot of white crime too, but like in the inner cities, it's majority black because that's the volume of minority people there. It's kind of there's just like huge disparity. There's a lot of people there that are people of color,
right?
But
that goes back into earlier what I was saying. Like if you're born into a situation in the home where there is no father because of all the things.
That's where I was getting. It's like, and we're starting to see like the destabilization of like a nuclear family, like the like. Back in like the early 60s when the welfare state started and it started like taking traction, like the government started like incentivizing like off of like those single mother homes. Like they were like, okay, like since you don't have a father, we'll just give you welfare. Right. So it's like, and that progressed. Like that's another systemic thing that went like that transcended through time. It's like. You still see that today. It's like there's a lot of black kids that don't have a father, man. It's like you guys like everyone needs that father figure in the home to like kind of so like when you don't have that, there's a thing that I think it was Obama said like I said you're more likely to commit a crime, you're more likely to be in poverty without your father being in the home. And you're starting to see that.
it's
So there's a lot of these people
it's
that
like
you
you're
see.
more likely to drop out of high school,
Exactly,
more likely
dude.
to commit crime, more likely to be addicted to drugs, more likely to end up in prison, like more like there's like this whole
And
list.
some of
like,
these people
things.
commit crimes. Some of these people go into the police force, and some of these guys are the ones that are doing they're being like brutal to these people. They're the ones who commit the acts of police brutality, and there's these people that are committing these crimes that have no father at home. So like it kind of goes hand in hand. Then at the same time, it's just like like we need to get rid of this whole we need to cleanse this whole. There's like a lot of things that we need to clean out. Like when it comes to police reform, we need to have like temperament training. It's like if you don't have the right temperament and
Temperament and psyche,
and like you have to be calm and like situated in like certain situations, and like there's another thing is like militaries, like you like SWAT vehicles, like dude, like there's like driving, like I remember in Stafford County, like the Walmart, they like drove in with like an APC with like a gun, and I was like, okay, what do you need that for? Like
nothing.
It's like this isn't like Call of Duty or Battlefield, dude. Like you know, like no one needs that. If you need that, like you can call like National Guard and the military. It depends on the situation, but you don't need like all that military style great stuff. You just don't. But like I can understand certain situations. There's like a like hostage situation, they put like bombs in somebody, like C4 or whatever. Like
that's like
I could get that.
That's like a once in a whatever. So like you need like one or two of those types of teams,
you don't
just
need,
in case. But
you
like
need that like budget or like units for that. You know what I mean? So like that's another thing. The budget needs to be reallocated and like for certain stuff in the police force. That I can get behind. But as far as like defunding police and replacing them with social workers, I'm not down with that at all. Because like when it comes to that type of crime, people are going to take advantage of that system. They're going to be like, oh, he doesn't have a gun, so I'll just just ignore him and keep doing what I'm doing, whatever. Like, but there's cops that be like, hey, like you need to comply, or like you're going to get arrested and stuff like that. Then like they can handle that situation. You know what I mean? So
and
it's
that's like another thing to consider with that is like if you send a social worker into a domestic abuse situation,
they're not going to know what to do.
Well, even if they do. If they're not armed and the guy is super violent and he kills the social worker, it's like, okay, so do you send them with a cop, or do you just send the cop and then later do you send a social worker? Like, how are you going to make that distinction every time? It's like, I don't see how that's a feasible thing. The other thing that I wanted to go back to is you were talking about the importance of the father figure in the nuclear family, and then I've seen some people post about when people say Black Lives Matter is a Marxist movement. And then people will say, well, how can it, like, it shouldn't be political because it should be about human matters or human lives or whatever, or human rights. There's a difference between Black Lives Matter, the organization, and Black Lives Matter, the movement, like with no caps and all caps. And on the Black Lives Matter organization website, they talk on the website, this is what we believe. They say, we believe that we need to dismantle the Western nuclear family and like dismantle the patriarchy.
Right.
And the Black community, from like you and most other people that I've talked to, is like, we need more fathers in the homes, and they don't want that. It's like how does that help the Black community? It doesn't. The Black Lives Matter movement and just the movement itself is like, yes, Black Lives Matter. Like we're all behind that.
Right.
But the problem is when people are like, oh, it's a Marxist movement, they don't know, like they just say it. They just say it because they just hear somebody on Fox say it or whatever.
So the public opinion, like the mainstream like narrative, so like that's what they go off of.
Right, but they don't understand why, and so when people go and have the discussion of why, they're like, well, it's just Marxist, I heard it on Fox. And then like the people on the other side are like, well, why are you getting political? It's like, okay, one, there's an actual distinction that they don't know about, so when they go spouting off about it, that is communist, it's like they just sound crazy because they don't actually understand the history of what's going on.
I think
people on the other side don't make the distinction either,
right?
Because they just think that this person is just a racist conservative, and so they just yell it. And then again, they're just yelling at each other.
Right. So that's like the solution. That's the cycle I was talking about. It's like the constant like feud of like trying to like you're debating and you're arguing. I'm sorry, just to reply. You're not doing it just to listen. Like you know, like and that people when I do this like on Facebook, like I get into a lot of debates and arguments on Facebook, and people think, oh, you just love to argue. It's like no, I'm genuinely like curious about like what the other person like thinks and like what's wrong and what's right about it, and like I want to hear what they have to say. So like people are like, oh, like all you do is it's like look, like I just like finding common ground. Like I don't like argue with people just to like, you know, just to piss them off or like, you know, just to make them mad or think I'm like better than them. That's like that's not like what I'm trying to accomplish. But yeah, like back to your point, I kind of want to reel that off into like accountability. Like when it comes to like those officers that what they did to George Floyd,
Right.
they should all be like prosecuted. There's
Right.
like none of them should have been like that, and that's another thing. It's like they got put out like on bail.
Mhm.
Like how'd they get that money? Because it was placed so high. So I was like, where the hell did they get all that money from?
Was it close to $1 million?
Yeah, it was like close to. I think it was a little bit more, but I was like, where are they getting this money from? Like, is it like people donating it, or is it something like in the system they just like they
pull it
discreetly
out.
give out and they don't
Yeah.
like disclose that information? So it's like
a separate budget line for the police.
yeah, and that's another thing. It's just like when it comes to the justice system, we need to have people that are unbiased and they're objective in their jobs. Like they don't play any games. Like they don't play into any type of system. Like racism's thrown out the window, like privilege thrown out the window. All that stuff's like whatever you did, and if it goes against the law, you have to receive that consequence for it, depending on the situation and what happened during that time. So like that's another thing that needs to be addressed too within like the federal like judicial system and all the other ones.
And that was kind of the intent behind the Supreme Court judges being there for life. So they were supposed to transcend whatever party was in power.
Right.
And it hasn't seemed to work out that as well as was intended, at least recently, anyways. But that was, I feel like the intent behind why they did that.
Right.
I didn't mean to cut you off. So.
No, you're good. Yeah. But yeah, that's. When going back to when I have arguments with people, like my perspective when we first started talking, I think a lot of my perspective personally has changed a lot when it comes to certain issues. So like I'm not as like conservative because like when I know there's like a lot of conservatives like that I know or like I'm friends with that they lack a lot of empathy for people. Yeah. And I know a lot of them because like first and foremost, like I'm a Christian, so like that kind of plays to my conservative like viewpoint.
Right.
And but like as I get older and as I progress and I kind of learn new things and like learn about other people's perspective, like you kind of have a change. So like if you're wrong about something on like in an argument or debate, it's okay to be wrong. Like like you can address that and say, okay, like I'm sorry, I didn't know that. It's something new I learned. So like but there's people that take that like as you're like of you being wrong and they attack you for it. So it's like oh, you're just stupid, you don't know what you're talking about. It's just like no, it's like I just never knew that. Like I wasn't aware. It's like this is like taking it. So like you taking in new material and like learning about other people's perspectives, that shouldn't be a negative thing. Right. So like that's something that needs to be kind of like put out the window too when it comes to like change of perspective or like having a disagreement. So it's like the point is to find common ground and like to have equity and equality for people. And I think a lot of people are starting to wake up like to that now. There's like I'm starting to see like a movement and it's just like like especially with the Black Lives Matter, like there's an organization and there's a movement. So like I feel like there's the movement right now. It's just like they're tired of like seeing this stuff going on, and they're not even just mad at the police. Like they're mad at like the politicians and the constituents that are in place. Like they're livid. So it's just like, what are we going to do to change this? And there's like the organization saying like, oh no, just get rid of the cops and that'll solve the issue. It's just like
no.
That's like the Marxist movement, but like that Marxist movement or that's within like the Black Lives Matter organization is kind of like hijacking like the
intentions of the movement itself.
The intention of the movement that's like trying to like create like a window, not even a window, just like erase all of like the negative history that's been oppressing people. That's including the constituents, the racism, the disparity, unequity and the inequality that's been going on for the past like 5-6 decades. So it's like they're trying to get rid of that. So I put whatever happened after Minneapolis with the George Floyd and they had the riots.
Right.
These are people that are like the people that are looting and rioting, like all this stuff and like all these innocent people's like businesses and stuff like that. These are the people that are hijacking that movement, and the police are retaliating against like peaceful protesters. So like you have people like just like peacefully protesting, like walking down the street, right? And like then all of a sudden like you see like some dude like come up with like bricks start crashing windows, and I've seen videos of people like, yo, like what are you doing? Like stop! Like why are you doing that? Yeah. Like we're trying to like have people protest. And like no, like screw the police, like this and that, like Antifa, that. So like it's just like. It's like people aren't seeing that. It's like it's getting hijacked, and it's like making them look bad. And that's the narrative. Like on Fox News, they're like, "Oh, these protesters are like destroying everything." It's like no, it's like those are the rioters, and like people are like they're doing that for their own gain. It's like
Yeah.
they're only doing that just for them. They don't care about Black Lives Matter. If they did, they would have been peacefully protesting like hand in hand with those people right next to them,
Right,
and
exactly.
like going down to like the courthouse or wherever they are to make their point.
Yeah, and then
So-
the cops see that and they tear gas the whole group.
Right,
And
right.
then CNN goes, cops attacked everybody, which is like, it's true, but they didn't show the person
Right,
who
and that's-
smashed the window. So
Right.
on Fox, you have all of them are smashing windows. On CNN, you have none of them are smashing windows.
Right.
And it's like, no,
So that's-
somewhere in the middle.
That's the divisive narrative,
Yeah.
like we were talking about. It's just like that's got to stop too. It's just like you have all these like major news outlets that are like causing so much division, especially with the whole like COVID stuff going on. They're just like saying like, well, the spikes are going up because all the Trump supporters are going to the rallies. But it's like, okay, so how is it the fact that magically Trump supporters can get they're the cause for spikes, but people can go out and peacefully protest
Yeah.
and they're not responsible for contributing to the spikes. But at the same time, it's like the death rate's going down. It's
Right.
like declining like really rapidly,
Yeah.
and that's not being put on the news either. So it's
No.
like they're trying to I feel like they're trying to put a lot of like fear mongering right now in a division and trying to kind of like keep people on their toes.
Yeah.
So just to kind of distract them from what needs to be actually talked about and
Right.
addressed. So
And it sucks too because Trump has done not a good job at all of handling COVID as far as public, as far as public perception and like,
Mhm.
hey, we're gonna get through this together. Like this is what we're gonna do. Instead, he's off talking about like, don't wear a mask, turning like everything like that's turned into a political issue. And he's off rambling about random drugs that may or may not work. Apparently, the study about hydroxychloroquine was found to that it did work.
was it the
That's the malaria drug.
oh okay yeah
So-
I remember he was talking about like the sun injecting sunlight UV rays into your system.
Yeah, so that was another one, and so
and
that came out.
disinfect it and stuff.
So there was a biotech company that was actually looking into that before Trump said it. So Trump got lucky when he was rambling, and they were actually working on a solution like that. They got banned on Twitter right after Trump said it because Twitter thought that they were supporting him, and like
Man,
like
that's
the whole-
another thing
like,
too.
it was so wacky because it was like they came out after Trump said it and was like, oh yeah, we're actually working on this, and they were like, oh, Twitter was like, really, ban, and then everybody else over here was like, Trump didn't actually know, and like that's true, he was rambling, he just got lucky that
Right.
small company happened to be working on it. And then
Right.
the thing with the hydroxychloroquine was like CNN came out with like a smear campaign right after he said that, and they were like that would never work. And about a week later, I was talking to my granddad, who's a surgeon, like worked at the Mayo Clinic, like articles, seminars, like all sorts of things. He was like, if I even think I'm getting COVID, he's like, I'm taking hydroxychloroquine. And I was like, well, I mean, if you said it, you're a medical expert, like
Right,
for
I'll
years and
take
years.
your
I was
advice
like,
for it. I'll
I'll
take
probably
your word
take
for it.
your advice, right?
Yeah.
So CNN's running a smear campaign, and then 2 days ago, I saw on Twitter, CNN tweeted, surprising new study finds hydroxychloroquine has good effect on patients with COVID. And I was like,
Right.
just like you, like nobody knows what to believe anymore, and
What?
then people just yell at each other.
Right. I think another thing is like when it comes to like freedom of expression and freedom of speech, like especially when it comes to Trump, he says like a lot of like ridiculous and like unempathetic things on Twitter, but it's like a lot of people is like, oh, he's like inciting like violence. He's like he's giving people empowerment to be like violent. Okay, I was like that has nothing to do with him. Like from what like he says, like he has the freedom and like the freedom of speech and whatever, and like. That's the only thing that what I disagree like with that whole like issue. It's just like he just needs to learn how to be like empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
He just that's something he needs to learn.
Right.
So it's like him saying that stuff like to other people that they feel like especially like racist people that happen to be Trump supporters or conservatives or whatever, and they
Right.
feel like if they feel empowered, that's not because of Trump. That's because they took it on themselves. But he said that, so that means I can go out and just punch some black person in the face because I'm white, and that's like so like that has nothing to do with Trump. That has something to do with you as your person. Like you just
Yeah.
you're just not right in the head. You know
it
what I mean?
also comes to the point of he's the president, and we generally hold our presidents to a higher standard.
Right.
He is not upholding that standard whatsoever,
Right.
and so it's very easy to say, "Oh, he said this." Like when he said "You start looting, we start shooting," I was like, "Why? That's
Right.
not
Well,
productive
I think
whatsoever."
he took that from a quote from I think it was like Miami, like a law enforcement individual.
No, it was back in the
something.
'60s. Somebody in Alabama said that when
It was Miami. It was like I think it was Miami. I read the
back in the
article on
'60s,
it.
right during civil rights.
Yeah,
But even so, it's like to go quote that. It's like.
and not clarify like what you meant.
Yeah, it's like that's the dumbest thing in the world,
Yeah.
and that can very easily be interpreted as inciting violence.
against people of color, and it was all over Twitter. But like, that's not what it meant though. Like, of course, people like took it to that step, and they say like, oh, he's talking about shooting black people. It's like, no, he's talking about people that are like looting like the businesses of like people that have done nothing wrong. Like, and that's another thing too. It's like, I get the frustration and I get the anger and the hate that's been going on, and like people are retaliating and like destroying stuff. They're just like they're literally destroying like the place and the constituents and all that stuff that's been oppressing them for like the past like 5-6 decades. So like I understand that frustration, but it's like that's just not the way to do it, because like that's not the way, like especially like Martin Luther King and like all of it, like he would never learn that. Like he would like he marched in Selma, and they came with the fire hoses and the police, whatever, and they used lethal, like not lethal force, but they used like
the dogs, the
brute force on him. Yeah, they used that stuff on him, and like he still got his message across. So it's like. Like, you don't go around destroying stuff. Then when someone says you shouldn't be, destroying people's business, like, it shouldn't be about the businesses. It should be about, Black lives. So it's like, okay, so there's people like trying to take like the different actions and the consequences, like in the sins, like destroying stuff, or like or like Black lives is more important. So like there's like people, they're like trying to put it like above each other. It's like it's all the same. You should like.
Putting it above each other and into another binary, which is like how everything turns into. It's like one or the other.
Right.
Is how everything is portrayed these days. Because it's so easy to like. It goes back to like we're on social media and we like the instant like gratification. So it's like, okay, yes or no.
Right.
Like simple, yes or no. I agree, don't agree.
Right.
And so that's everything has been turned into that now.
Right.
When these issues that we are facing, like the country is facing, are so complex that to turn it into a yes or no does such a disservice to everyone who cares about the issues, who's trying to solve the issues, and then the people that are going out and trying to like lobby for those issues, like the nuanced parts of it. Because if you have a bunch of people running around on Twitter going like defund the police, but you actually have a group that's trying to do like legit police reform, that group that's running around on Twitter like hurts what that.
They're just talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk.
They're hindering the efforts of the real group, because then other people who are on the other side are like, see, they all just want to defund the police, and it's like, no, stop it. Not the case.
Right.
You have this group that's trying to do actual things here, and it's like they get grouped into like the other group, which is the identity politics again, and then the same thing on the other side with the protesters. It's like all the protesters are breaking windows. It's like, no, it's just like this tiny group again. It's like. Right. And so it's like it turns it into an all or nothing every single time, and it's not the world. The world is not like that, and the fact that people either think it is or don't think enough to realize that it's not is definitely an issue. And it's like
it is. Yeah.
It's like when you like, and so what it turns into is like when you're having a bad day. And like somebody does something little that normally wouldn't annoy you, but that day it pisses you off. The whole country is like that all the time now.
Right. And they're on edge. Yeah.
Right. And you can't find solutions like that, because like I said earlier, if you're just yelling at each other, you're not working together to find the solution to the problem. So I'm not really sure. I don't know what way out of this I see, to be honest.
To be honest, I think it's probably going to get worse, to be honest. Like, given that like all these people that are in politics now, in our education system has been teaching like all like our generation and stuff, and like what we've like been exposed to, they're going to see that, and they're going to move up in those positions and take over in politics and government, whatever. Then it's going to change it like radically. It's going to like they're going to have even more extreme radical laws, and it's going to progress worse. So like that's what I'm saying. Like you're starting to see like the death of a country, like literally like we're living like in the beginning parts of like the country like breaking down into like something like a little bit more worse, but like it just depends like on the politics.
The one way I see out of it possibly is if this like postmodernist thing starts to kind of collapse on itself.
Right.
I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast. He had this guy named James Lindsay on, and he wrote a bunch. They wrote like 20 fake academic papers about like sexism and like all this sort of like ridiculous stuff, and they submitted it, and one of them got an award. It was about I'd have to go listen to it again. It was about dog parks. He wrote the paper as a girl and said that she went to dog parks and counted the amount of dog humping incidents and said that dog parks insinuated rape culture, and so you needed to retrain all the dogs. And it like won an award from some journal, from some like, and so it's like I'll send you the link afterwards.
Yeah.
But it's like if this collapses on itself, like I don't see how this get. If Trump gets reelected, I don't see how this gets better in the near term, because people are going to be so mad.
Yeah.
I think one of the ways is if Biden gets. This is going to sound horrible. If Biden gets elected, picks a decent vice president, and then like for whatever reason he becomes like super senile within 6 months, and they have an actual decent president, it's like that could be a way out. I don't know.
Yeah, right now it's just like I'm more interested in what Trump is going to bring to the table, given to like what's going on right now in like the current state of the country and like the economy. I really don't really care about like what he has to say. I'm just more interested in like, all right, what's going on now? What are you going to do to fix it?
Yeah.
Instead of like running your mouth on Twitter and like going on your campaign ads saying, oh, I'm going to do this and that. Like, cool. Like, if you're going to say you're going to do it, you need to do it. It's like I don't want a repeat of like Obama for 8 years and you've like completed nothing the whole time. So it's like he's starting. I saw that he started to do like some good things. It's like some have been really good, some have been good, some have been like yeah, okay, like cool. And there's like other stuff that he's failed to like kind of deliver on. So
I think you sent he did a couple of executive orders recently. I think you sent me some of them. I don't remember.
There's one with it values job experience over a degree now.
That'll be good as far as driving the price of college down.
So I think now, I think that's good for especially college students when they come out and or especially if people that are working and ain't going to college, if they come out, they automatically are going to they're going to be in a better position to get a job.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people will go out of college and they get some job that's not paying enough or it's not good enough, and they have a degree. They're like, oh, you need job experience. It's like I went to school for 4 or 5 years. Like, why do I don't need job experience. I have a degree. I'm starting at an entry point or an entry position. I just work my way up. Why I have to have experience? It's kind of redundant for someone to go to school for 4 to 5 years and not be able to get a job that's well paying and it's going to support you. You know what I mean? So it's I think that was a good move on him. To be honest.
I think it'll help drive down the price of university eventually in the next 10, 15 years, because they'll realize the price will go down because work experience is valued as much, and so people who don't go to school hopefully will end up being on more of an equal par with people who do have degrees. The degrees therefore won't be in as much demand, so people won't feel the need to go to school. The demand goes down. They can't keep the price high for the universities because nobody's going to want to pay it, so they'll have to bring it down at some point. So that'll be one that'll take a long process, but that's going to be a 10, 15 years before we see a difference in that one. But yeah, I don't. Did he do? Was there another one that he signed recently?
He probably signed a couple that I didn't know about. There's another one. It's a prison reform.
What's that one say?
I know it brought back a lot of people that are incarcerated, especially of black people that came back that've been incarcerated for crimes that just kind of wrongly incriminated for, small petty crimes, and they able to come back and be reunited with their family. So that was another good thing. I haven't really researched on some of the executive actions he did. I need to kind of look into that more. But I think as far as addressing the issues in the black community and the police reform, that's something he needs to kind of focus on, as well as the whole COVID thing. So people are not in a state of fear, or they're not trying to be in control. And people need to feel more comfortable when they go out. So now people don't feel that way because COVID and police and all that stuff. So I just think Trump really needs to be a lot more empathetic about what he says on and being a president. I was you got to kind of drop this whole this TV businessman character or whatever you're trying to put on. Just be a leader. That's all you got to do. It's not hard.
I don't know if it's an act though. That's the thing. like I heard people who've interviewed him are just like, that's just how he is all the time. In which case, it's like telling him to drop the act is not really it's not an act. It's like that's definitely an issue because then it's like if we have a leader who's not a leader, it's like
I think that's another thing. I think the system works against like an actual like moral person that's like has the capability of being a leader. Like the system works against that.
Yeah,
They just won't allow it. So like
because they don't want to play the game.
But-
like if they're
right.
a moral person, they don't want to play the immoral game to get to the top, and so
Right.
it weeds all those people out.
exactly,
And then it keeps all the circle of like
you know,
the
corrupt people, the people that have been
favors,
career politicians, all
people
that
throwing
stuff.
favors for campaign donations,
Right, lobbyists,
and
all that.
lobbyists,
Yep.
and all that. So like
Yep.
people who we would actually want as leaders can't get in because
There's like
they're not corrupt.
Yeah. I was gonna say there's a lot of what do you call it? When it comes to like Trump and like Obama and like all them, like there's always a track record. There's always something that's going against them like during their presidency. So it's like when is that ever going to stop? Like when can we get someone that has like of course people are going to have they're going to have past and like people are going to pull it up and say, oh, he did this and that, okay, cool. But like you're, like constantly like after every month there's something new. So it's like we want someone that's like going to be moral and have like these standards for equality and equity and like, you know, better health care and, you know, police reform and, you know, bringing capital back to the inner cities, making them booming again, help creating a better economy and like fixing immigration, all this other stuff that's like not being fixed. So it's like there's like that's another thing like politicians, they're just as responsible as Trump is. Like Trump can't just like sign off on every executive action just to like override. It's like they have to be in like sync with him. So it's like kind of like a top down like and a bottom top thing. It's like you guys gotta like work with this guy. Like if there's like certain issues like they can't even sit down and talk to each other without having their own bias. Like he sat down with like Nancy Pelosi and like Chuck Schumer and like they discussed under like 5 minutes and he's like, well, I don't agree with that. And I'm like, well, I don't want to do it then. Goodbye, and like left. So it's just like that. It's like kind of like petty like politics. Like if you're not gonna like come to agreement, like especially for like the 330 million people that are living here, like for the benefit for them, it's like you have no
No,
they're not.
They're
You know what I mean?
They're
It's
not
like
being public servants.
right. So it's like you have like no business like being in like the Oval Office at all, and like you have no business being a career politician if you have done nothing for the 40, 50 years you've been in here. So it's like. You know what I mean? Like, but that's not going to change because
they won't vote themselves.
Yeah, the identity politics and all the other crap plays into it.
The only a way I see out of that, the digging stuff up on people all the time, is if we ended up not in the two-party system. Because right now it's very easy to be like, oh, somebody on the other side is bad. But if there's like 4 or 5 sides, then it's like, okay, well, who are you going to dig stuff up on now? Because you might need to work with them to build like a coalition government. Right. That's one of the parts of like the British system that I like is like they have to work together to build coalitions to get into power. It's like I like on paper the structure of the United States government, but if we had the British party system, I think that would be good because then it wouldn't be a binary anymore. You would have so many more options. You'd have people that would be forced to work together because you have like 4 or 5 parties that each take up like 15 to 25%. So they can't just pass whatever they want because they have a majority. The way that like if somebody wins the House here, it's like they have the majority. They can just do whatever they want. Well, if they have all 3.
Right.
But if that was the case, then it would be like you'd have 25% of one party, 10%, 15%, like 20, and then like another 5. And so like they'd have to work together to get stuff passed, and like something like that would have to take hold. Right. And I'm not really sure. Like this coming election, I'm strongly considering voting third party. I've had people try to talk me out of it with what you hear every time you say you're going to vote third party. Well, it's a vote for the other side, really. And then it's like, okay, well then. Like, I might as well not vote if my vote doesn't matter. It's like, well, you have to do your civic duty and vote. It's like that whole cycle thing. But if there was going to be one election where a third party was going to win, if Jo Jorgensen gets enough support, like if she gets like 1 or 2 like big name celebrities to just like put her name out there, who knows, dude? Like this could be the year because like I know so many people are fed up with people that I know that normally would vote Democrat for sure. Like Biden sucks. And I'm obviously not going to vote for Trump. So it's like, okay, well, what are you doing then? I don't know.
Yeah.
So and the thing is, like, if everybody starts to think like that, right? The reason why, or one of the reasons why I think nobody votes third party now is because they get pressured into saying, oh, well, a vote for third party is really just a vote for Trump or it's a vote for Biden, like, so it doesn't matter. And they get pressured into saying like it takes votes away from the person that you need to win, right? You've heard that before.
Sort of, but like you kind of see like libertarian kind of means like limited government. So it's like
Right.
that's what you should want. Like you shouldn't want more government. You should
Right.
want like
So
like
what I'm
limited and like
getting at is
regulated.
people get pressured into voting for one of the two big parties because people say their vote is like doesn't matter if you vote for third
Right.
party. But if more people were like, screw that, I'm voting third party, like if you had a mindset shift, like within culture as a whole, like normalizing voting third party, that would, I mean, like obviously like it'll be really hard to make that happen, but that would be a thing. Like if there was going to be an election where it was going to happen. It's
Yeah,
like,
I agree. That's what, going back to the whole Killer Mike point. Like he's
Yeah.
saying like he's like just sitting there like bickering over like who's the
Yeah.
best master. It's like like just be your own person. Just throw the identity box out the window and just pick like
what
who
works
you think
best for
like
you.
what works
Yeah.
best. Like where's the change and like where the progress is going to be at. That's where you need to vote. Like it doesn't matter like the identity politics of like the parents of like who they say they are.
Yeah.
So
So I think we've brought it full circle. That's a good place to end.
yeah, man.
Will, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
People can find you on Instagram at
Lil Willie Vert.
Lil Willie Vert. We'll put the links in the description. Sounds good. Bye, everybody.